There comes a moment in life when a person realizes a quiet but powerful truth, that most of their suffering was never caused by what happened, but by how deeply they were attached to it. Years are often lost replaying the same questions. Why did this happen? Why did that person leave? Why didn't life go the way I wanted? Yet some of the wisest philosophies in human history discovered something different, something unsettling but liberating. Real power does not come from controlling life. It comes from learning how to detach from it. In this video, you will discover how to move from a life of emotional attachment and constant overthinking into a rare psychological state of calm, clarity, and unbothered confidence. You'll learn 2 deceptively simple mindsets that can completely transform how you see rejection, relationships, disappointment, and even success. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the moment you stop chasing outcomes is often the exact moment life begins to work in your favor. So stay with me until the end, because the final idea might completely change the way you see everything that happens in your life. Before we dive in, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Most people believe their suffering comes from what happens to them. A breakup, a rejection, a missed opportunity, a message that never arrived. But if you look deeper, something far more subtle is happening. The pain rarely comes from the event itself. It comes from the meaning we attach to it and the story we begin repeating in our minds. A person can lose a relationship and rebuild their life stronger than ever. Another person can experience the same event and spend 10 years replaying it in their head. The event was the same. The difference was attachment. This is why some people move through life with calm confidence while others are constantly shaken by every small change. The secret is not luck. It is not personality. It is a mental skill that very few people are taught. Detachment. Detachment does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It does not mean you stop caring about people or outcomes. Real detachment means something far more powerful. It means you can experience life fully without allowing it to control your inner state. You feel your emotions, but they do not own you. You experience loss, but it does not destroy your identity. And strangely enough, the moment people begin to understand this principle, something remarkable happens. Life becomes lighter. Relationships become healthier. Decisions become clearer. Because when attachment disappears, clarity appears. One of the most powerful ways to understand this idea comes from a very old philosophical perspective that has influenced psychology more than most people realize. It is the mindset behind a famous story about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors rushed to him and said, "What terrible luck." The farmer simply replied, "Maybe." The next day the horse returned, bringing another horse with it. The neighbors celebrated and said, "What great fortune." The farmer again replied, "Maybe." The following day, the farmer's son tried to ride the new horse and fell, breaking his leg. Once again, the neighbors said, "How unfortunate." And once again, the farmer answered, "Maybe." Days later, a war broke out, and every able-bodied young man was forced into battle, except the farmer's injured son. The story seems simple, but it reveals something profound about the human mind. People rush to label events as good or bad far too quickly, yet life unfolds in ways no one can predict. What looks like failure today may quietly become the door to something better tomorrow. Modern psychology has begun to confirm what ancient wisdom suggested long ago. Researchers studying emotional regulation have repeatedly found that the meaning people assign to events determines the intensity of their emotional reaction. A well-known review published in the journal Psychological Bulletin showed that cognitive reappraisal, changing how we interpret an event, significantly reduces emotional distress and increases psychological resilience. In simple terms, the brain reacts less violently when we stop declaring events as final disasters and instead allow space for uncertainty. That single shift from "this is terrible" to "we'll see what happens" changes the entire emotional trajectory of the experience. This is why one of the most powerful mindsets you can practice is the maybe mindset. When something unpleasant happens, the mind immediately tries to lock the event into a negative narrative. It says, "This is bad, this ruined everything, this proves something is wrong." But when you interrupt that narrative with a simple response, maybe, you prevent your mind from imprisoning itself inside that interpretation. That single word introduces psychological flexibility. It opens the door to possibilities the mind would otherwise ignore. The event is no longer a disaster. It becomes a moment in a longer story whose ending has not yet been written. Another mindset works alongside this one, and it is equally powerful. It is the idea of this or something better. Most attachment is created when a person convinces themselves that a single outcome is the only acceptable outcome. One specific relationship, one specific opportunity, one specific plan for life. The moment the mind believes that everything depends on that single result, emotional pressure skyrockets. But when the mind adopts the perspective of this or something better, the psychological tension begins to dissolve. Instead of clinging desperately to one possibility, you remain open to the possibility that life might deliver something even more aligned with your growth. And surprisingly, research in positive psychology suggests that this openness is not just comforting, it is actually beneficial for well-being. Studies summarized in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology have shown that people who maintain flexible goals and adaptive expectations recover more quickly from disappointment and show greater long-term life satisfaction. In other words, the ability to loosen your grip on a specific outcome does not weaken you. It strengthens your psychological stability. Nowhere is this principle more important than in relationships. Many people approach love from a place of emotional dependence without realizing it. They unconsciously assign their happiness to another person's behavior. A message brings excitement. Silence creates anxiety. Attention feels like validation. Distance feels like rejection. But this pattern creates an invisible imbalance. When your emotional stability depends on someone else's actions, you surrender control of your inner world. Your peace becomes negotiable. Detachment restores that balance. It allows you to appreciate someone without needing them to complete you. You can enjoy connection without turning it into survival. And paradoxically, this kind of emotional independence often makes relationships stronger rather than weaker. When someone knows that you value yourself, that your happiness does not collapse in their absence, the dynamic becomes healthier. There is no desperation, no silent pressure. Just two individuals choosing to share their lives rather than clinging to each other out of fear. To reach this state, however, something important must happen internally. A person must build a relationship with themselves that feels stable and meaningful. Many people spend years developing connections with others, but very little time developing familiarity with their own inner world. Learning to spend time alone without feeling empty is one of the most powerful psychological transformations a person can experience. Solitude stops feeling like absence and begins to feel like space. Space to think clearly, space to grow, space to return to your own center. When this internal stability forms, something subtle changes in your interactions with the world. You stop chasing validation. You stop trying to force outcomes. You begin to move through life with quiet confidence. And from that place, a fascinating shift occurs. Situations that once triggered emotional chaos lose their power. A delayed message becomes insignificant. A rejection becomes information rather than humiliation. A closed door becomes direction rather than defeat. Your mind becomes like a lighthouse standing in the middle of moving waves. Life continues to change around you. People come and go, opportunities appear and disappear, but your internal structure remains steady. This steadiness is not created by suppressing emotions. It is created by understanding them without becoming controlled by them. You still feel disappointment, but it does not define your identity. You still experience sadness, but it does not become your entire worldview. And perhaps the most liberating realization is this: most of the suffering people experience is not produced by reality itself, but by the endless thinking about reality. The human mind is incredibly powerful, but it often misuses that power by replaying events, inventing explanations, and constructing stories that may have little connection to the truth. Someone delays responding to a message, and the mind creates 10 theories. Someone behaves differently, and the mind builds an entire narrative around it. Hours of emotional energy are spent analyzing situations that might have simple explanations, or none at all. When you reduce unnecessary thinking, a surprising calm begins to appear. You respond to what is actually happening instead of what your mind imagines might be happening. Life becomes less dramatic and more manageable. And over time, this combination of mindsets begins to transform how you move through the world. Maybe keeps you open to possibility. This, or something better, frees you from desperate attachment. Emotional detachment protects your inner stability. Reduced overthinking restores clarity. The result is not indifference, it is freedom. Freedom from chasing approval, freedom from clinging to outcomes, freedom from allowing temporary events to define your entire emotional life. And when a person reaches this state, something beautiful begins to happen. Opportunities appear more naturally. Relationships become more authentic. Decisions become wiser. Because when the mind is no longer trapped by attachment, it finally has the space to see life clearly. And that clarity changes everything. What you're about to see will shatter everything you think you know about women. Machiavelli's brutal truth about female nature, never published. Don't forget to like and subscribe.